Hi everyone, welcome back to Growing Up in Scientology. Today I'm bringing to you part 2 of my ongoing series of interviews with Nathan Rich, who was featured in Season 2, Episode 7 of Scientology and the Aftermath. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, check it out, and otherwise, here you go. All right, welcome back to part 2 of Aaron Smith-Levin talking with Nathan Rich. Morning, Nathan.
How's it going, everybody? Good evening.
Good. It's been a long time. Good to see you again. All right, so let's. There's just so much ground we can cover. One thing I will want to comment on is they told the Susie Q's in the horseshit story last night on Leah's show. You were just in our last video yesterday. You were saying this is one story I really wish they didn't have to cut out of the show. And did you see that they aired that last night?
So actually, Tara sent me a video of somebody that had videotaped it playing on TV. So I saw it in that way. But yeah, I just watched it actually about 30 minutes ago. And I'm glad it got out. You know, I don't know how many people saw it, but I'm glad it was out there.
Well, I mean, each one of these shows is seen, if you include the people that watch it on TiVo the following week, by almost 3 million people.
Nice.
Pretty good.
Okay, good. I mean, right after it was a KFC commercial, and my girlfriend goes, "What was that?" And I go, "Oh, that's KFC." And she's like, "No, the video."
All right. There was a few questions on a few comments that were posted in response to the video that was uploaded yesterday. One of them was asking what your tattoos meant. There's only a few that are particularly visible. Do they have, I guess there's a bunch of characters on your arm that I saw. Those have any particular meaning?
Oh, these? Yeah, this is Chinese, and it's I won't say it in Chinese to embarrass myself, but basically it means it's kind of like if you live through hardship, you will have good fortune afterwards. It literally means big difficulty, not die, must have future luck. So if you went through some crazy stuff and you survived, then may the good luck be with you. So that's kind of a charm that I have, and it's kind of a hopeful proverb, I think. So that's what that one means. And then I've got probably some people are probably wondering about my fingers. So I've been in the sort of, maybe I could hold it closer. So I've been in the technical, computer technical field for about 10 years now, 11 years. And these are actually little pieces. If you take a very old microprocessor, a CPU from when I was young, CPU is like this square. And if you turn it over, and the inside is the actual CPU, it's very small. And if you blow that up into like a diagram of all of the little things connecting, and then you just kind of say, that little square, slap that here. That little square over there, slap that here. And so my fingers are basically made up of little junctions of pieces of CPU. So in the tech community, like outside of the tech community, people look at me and they go, "Oh, tattoos on the fingers, oh." And then like in the past when I've applied to jobs and stuff, they'll look and they'll say, "What do those tattoos mean?" And then I tell them and they're like, "Awesome. Oh, that's great, CPU, wow." They're like, you think I'm like so it's great. So it actually, if you're going for IT, it kind of helps.
That's awesome. Now, if they're Chinese characters, how are they parts of a CPU? What does that mean?
No. This is the Chinese characters here on my arm.
Oh, those things on your fingers are literally not Chinese characters?
No, these are literally if I literally took an image of a CPU that was a huge like mechanical diagram of it. It's like that little area, put that here.
Oh, wow.
Like
that is pretty clever. I get it.
Yeah. And so that's why computer people are just like, whoa. And then I've got Linux tattooed on my arm over here, which is an operating system for us nerds. And so when they see that, they're just like, because it looks like it says something in death metal or something cool, and it just says Linux.
That's awesome. All right, let's see. And also, if while we're doing this video, your cat happens to come within arm's reach, I think people would love to see your awesome cat.
Okay, I can actually see him right now, but he's too far to grab. So if he comes over here, I'll grab him.
All right, well, I'm just going to pick a direction to go here, and let's just chat about it. A few days ago, I had put up a video on the channel speculating as to why so many Scientologists die of cancer. And I remember at the end of your story that you were telling on the Aftermath, your mom passed away. Is that right?
Yeah. My mother died of cancer.
And how old was she?
She would have been 40, 50, 51.
That's awfully young to die of cancer. Did you see, actually you messaged me after that video saying that basically what I discussed was very similar to what had happened with your mom. Can you say how do you know how the whole process, like how far advanced she was when she got diagnosed, how long she had symptoms but didn't go see a doctor for various reasons having to do with Scientology or not, and anything like that?
So when I saw your video, it was, I mean, it's just crazy because I see you talking about stuff and it just has often has a lot to do with my life. And maybe in some ways I'm more typical than I think, but my mother and I hadn't talked for years, and basically I was working in LA in Santa Monica at a visual effects company, and I just got this call suddenly, and it was a call from my aunt. And they had to, I don't know how they get anyone's number, but somehow she got my number at work, called me up, and just said that my mother something was wrong with her, that she had gone into the hospital a few days earlier with intestinal problems, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. And as she's telling me this, I'm thinking, if they can't figure out what's wrong with her, that's not good. That's not a good thing to hear from the doctor. That's very rare. If you actually have a problem bad enough to be in the hospital and they don't even know what it is, that's a big problem. So my ears are going up and I'm going, what is going on? Then they were, I could hear my other aunt and my grandmother in the background, and that one of them was crying, and then they were kind of arguing about, if what to do. And I was living in LA and they're all in Florida, in Clearwater and a few towns around Clearwater, countryside and stuff. And I think she was in St. Pete. And I was panicking. I was saying, where is she at? What hospital is she at? And I could hear one of the people in the background, I think it was my aunt, saying no, don't. And the other one, they were just fighting over if they should even tell me where she was. I'm just standing here in the middle of work, on the phone. And anyway, so then they finished by saying they didn't know what it was, and then they had figured out that she came in, they didn't know what it was, and that now they had figured it out, and it was cancer, and it wasn't looking good. And so they said, let's just see how it goes. I don't think, it might interbulate her, it might restimulate her. So let's just, we're gonna call you back. So I just got off the phone with them, and I was just thinking, I guess they're going to talk amongst themselves, get back to me. And then that was, I don't remember exactly which day, it was something like Wednesday or Thursday. And then the next week they called me, and that was it. She had already died. And so I didn't know what to say. I mean, I hadn't talked to her in a long time, and we kind of parted on, as bad of terms as you can possibly be with somebody, I think. And yet she was my mother, and I was just really devastated that she had died so suddenly, and just the state of her life when she died was just not optimal for anyone. I mean, she was extremely overweight, and she, didn't have any boyfriend or husband for years and years and years, maybe 20 years. And she just, I don't know, it just, I was really torn up about it, and I didn't know what to say. So I asked about a funeral, and they said it's going to be in 2 weeks. We're going to do a funeral in 2 weeks, and I said, okay, please call me and let me know the details, and I will get tickets. I will fly out there, and so that was the end of that call. And then I had to go back to work. You know, like the next week, I called. She had left her number, and I called my aunt back and said, like, what's going, you know, what's up with the funeral? And she said, oh, we already had it. Yeah, we already had it. We just had a little, you know, just a little get together with some friends and family, and we, you know, there wasn't a burial. She wanted to be cremated, and she had handwritten, according to them, she had handwritten a will. Just in the very end, and she just gave everything to the church and to, you know, some of the stuff to us. Point to come out, and you know, yeah, we'll send you some stuff if there's anything that we find that's yours. And so they sent me a box of some pictures of me as a child and with my mom, and you know, those go up to like age 8, and then I think there's like maybe 4 after age 8, and then that's it.
Jesus Christ!
So that's how my mother passing went, and thing that when I saw one of the other aftermath episodes, I saw somebody talking about kind of a similar situation with them, and I just felt. I was actually kind of angry, to be honest with you, that my part of that story didn't get to be aired, because I felt like, yeah, that happened to me, you know. But unfortunately, you know, the episode was just about one subject, and this isn't that subject, so I understand. But anyway, to kind of answer your question about that, doctors in my household, when, you know, with my mother and I, the way that we viewed doctors was we would go to the doctor if we needed to. And when I say needed to, I mean you're bleeding, or you have collapsed, right? And I mean collapsed. I don't mean like you fell, you know, or something like out of Dr. House, like how that episode. If you're having one of those problems, maybe you will go to the doctor. But I'm very doctor resistant even now because of that sort of training. I mean, you know, people around me will go to the doctor if they sense something's wrong with them. And to me, it's just feels crazy. You know, I just feel like, oh, I just tough it up, you know, get through it, take some more vitamins, you know? And so there's no way that she would have been getting tested for cancer. No way. Impossible. I've never seen her get tested for anything ever in my life. And she just didn't operate that way. And the weird thing is that by the time I knew her and was born, she was already a Scientologist. So it's not like I can really observe a big change and say, well, she used to go to the doctor all the time, and then she got into Scientology. Now she doesn't. But I wouldn't feel crazy hazarding a guess saying that it was, you know, at least partially due to the way that Scientology really discourages, obviously psychiatry, psychology, but even regular doctors. You know, they're very big into pushing chiropractic and homeopathy and all these sort of alternative ways of treating your body, which I think is just the beginning of them slowly getting you into this idea of, oh, there's alternatives to everything. Oh, you're depressed. You don't have to, you know, go see a psychiatrist. There might be some other answers out there. It's like they're priming you to get you. But anyway, so that's what happened with her. And it was pretty rough. And that really, that's really the, you know, the thing about me is, if you've seen my kind of a Scientology attack video, you know, they dug up what they could, but they didn't get it all. And I kind of taunted them and told them, you know, go find some more, you know, I don't care. So I'm pretty open about stuff. I've done a lot of stuff in my life. I haven't been a saint. And of all those things, I don't really regret any of them, you know. My view is kind of like, oh, I messed up, you know, whatever, you know, who cares? But the one thing that I really do regret is not patching things up with my mother. It was just, I don't know if I was just selfish or I was just too emotional, but I should have just at least leveled out with her and just been like, agree to disagree or some level of speaking terms with her. And I didn't do that. And I take responsibility for that. And I blame myself for that. And it just sucks, you know, because she's
Would it
gone.
even have been possible though? Because I was going to ask you that it was clear in your story there was this aspect of disconnection between you and your mother, and yet I'm pretty sure that you've never been declared a suppressive person by the Church of Scientology. And so I was going to ask what the real driver of that disconnection was. And in the story, it sounded like it had a lot to do with the ranch, but at the same time, like what was going on? Was the church telling your mom to disconnect? Was she just being a ultra super Scientologist to figure that the right ethics gradient for you to get you to turn your life around would be to disconnect from you? Was the disconnection due to Scientology issue? Like meaning she didn't think you were not Scientology enough to be connected to, or was it this crazy idea that Scientology parents get that the leverage you use over your children is whether you're going to like ever speak to them again or not?
No, it wasn't that. It was Scientology. It was the Scientology aspect of it. My mother was I don't know. I mean, she was 100% true believer. She was just completely dedicated to it, and she was one of the most dedicated non-Sea Org people I've ever met. I mean, she's more dedicated than staff members you would meet. You know, she would even be like, we'd be driving home from an org or whatever, and she'd be kind of going like, saying, you know, just saying remarks about how they weren't really, you know, they weren't really Scientologists. They were close, you know, and things like that. She was all about Scientology, and my life was therefore all about Scientology. And the reason that the disconnect happened was that at an early age, before the ranch the first time when I was very young, I was crying to get out of sessions, and I'm sure they told my mom that. And I was, you know, starting to get like kicked out of the Scientology schools. But it's not because I wasn't getting kicked out because I got in a fight. I was getting kicked out because I was talking back and questioning the tech, you know, and not wanting to do it. And I think most people look back, and Scientology obviously tries to exploit this by saying he got kicked out of every daycare. He's been a matter. I don't think she really cared about that. I think it's that the indicator of why I'm getting kicked out. Oh, why did he get kicked out? Is it because he fights all the time? Do I have a son that fights all the time? Because we can handle that. Because he doesn't want to do the tech. That's a problem. And then she tried the ranch, and then I got out, and this whole other extremely crazy, dramatic time of my life happened when I got out of the ranch when I was 9. And then everything kind of mellowed out for the first time in a very long time when I was about 10 or 11. And that lasted about 2 years. And that's really the only 2 years of my life where things have been relatively copacetic. Before I was 28 or so, 25, 26, 28, 27, somewhere in there. The first 25 years of my life, I would say from 0 to 4 wasn't great from what I can remember, which is not much. And 11 to 12 was good, and maybe 6 to 7 was good. And other than that, it was all throwaway. Anyway, I'm rambling, but the point is, so 11 and 12 was all about Scientology for me. It was all about courses and running around on FLB, the flag land base in Florida, and just being a Scientology kid, but I wasn't really in it. So I kind of had fun, and she was just happy enough with what I was doing, you know, and it was just kind of balanced. And then it went imbalanced towards me not wanting to do it even heavier. And then I got sent back to the ranch, and then she just left me there basically for dead. And then years later, I came home, and I guess their hopes were up that now I'm back and he's ready to get with the program. And then I wasn't ready to get with the Scientology program. And I think, you know, and then I ran away. And I think at that point, she just said, all right, you know, he's never going to get with the program. He's never going to be a Scientologist. He's just like his father. Goodbye. And I tried calling her a couple months after I ran away, and I was, you know, I was in a bad place then. I mean, I was as homeless as it gets. And I tried calling. I was sparing change to get quarters to put into payphones so that I could call her. And I was just happy I could even remember her number. And I was asking her if I could come back. I want to do my Pura. I'm sorry. I've done all these drugs. And she just said no. She said, you know, I'm sorry, but you know, we don't really want to talk to you. So, and she, you know what she did? She gave me the number of somebody in Seattle, because I was in Seattle this time. The number of somebody in Seattle who I had never met before, who was supposedly one of her friends, and said, he works at the church. You can maybe hook up with him and do your Pure over there. And I said, can I get Sharon, my aunt's number or anything? And she just said, no, they don't want to talk to you. You know, we don't want to talk to you. And that was one of the last, you know, 4 times that I talked to her. And that was when I was 17.
It's unbelievable. But that's also why I asked, would it even have been possible for if you had tried to settle it up with your mom? And I asked because this is another part of your story. Yeah. Let's move on.
And I forgot to mention there that before I went to the ranch, I actually joined the FSO. So I was the assistant of the senior CS int at FLB. And so I think her hopes got really up because of that. And I actually think that's the reason that she sent me to the ranch in the first place. You know, I mean, the Scientology will say it's because I'm this big life of crime guy, but I think it was really because I joined the Sea Org and then I didn't go through with it, and I wasn't really a Sea Org member and I wasn't into it. And I actually joined to get away from her. I joined so I could live alone and be away from the pressure, weirdly. It's kind of like being in the eye of the hurricane. It's like, well, I'm safe here. You know, there's Scientology all around me, and yet in the Sea Org, my experience of it was they don't pressure you to do any auditing ever. It's like you got to pressure them because they know it's like they get nothing from it. And then you have to do courses, but it's like staff hatting courses. It's like how to be a better staff member. It's not really about Scientology that much, at least in the early stages that I was in. I only lasted a few months, and then I was like, all right, this is not for me. So it was definitely, I think, it was definitely Scientology based. I can't see any world that my mother and I similar relationship in than this one. I mean, there's like, I don't know if that sentence made any sense, but the only way that our dynamic could have worked the way that it did, it turned out the way that it was, is because of Scientology. There's no, you know what I'm trying to say. It was just, but to answer your question, I keep skirting around. I don't know if I could have, and no one's ever actually asked me that. And so I need to kind of think about it, but I guess you're kind of right, because if I was imagining, you know, when I say that and I say, I wish I had repaired it, I'm kind of just assuming that it would happen. What I guess I'm really saying is I wish I had tried to repair it, you know. At least I would feel a little better that way, but I didn't even try after a point. I sent her this nasty email. More stuff happened, so don't think that's the only thing that happened. But I tried to go to school a few years later. I was still homeless and I was trying to go to school, and that part was on the show. I was like, no, and it just left me for dead again, it felt like. And I knew her email was like the AOL email, and I emailed her and I just said, I couldn't say all this on the show, but what I said to her on the show, I just said, oh, I said all this bad stuff, and they cut out most of what I was saying because it's kind of not appropriate for everybody. But what I was saying is, like, I hope you die alone. I hope you are, you know, die alone at your computer with nobody loves you, and you know the pain that you've given me, and you're a miserable piece of shit. Like, I just said the worst stuff I could possibly think of to say to someone. And I was just so done. You know, you have you so clearly are disconnected from me, and you're forcing me to be disconnected from everyone else in the family. and you're just casting me aside for this, as I thought at that time, religion. And I just was done. And I just told her all this stuff. And that's the last calm, if you will, that she got from me. And that made it even worse, because I'm not that kind of guy. And I'm especially not that kind of guy now, because I've done, you know, that kind of stuff and been through this experience. But even then, I'm not a hateful person. I wasn't a hateful person then. I just got up to that level where I just, you know, I couldn't take it anymore. And I could just see that no matter what I wanted, she wasn't going to help me. It didn't matter what I wanted. I mean, it literally got to the point where I felt like if I would have told her that I want to come back to the org and join Scientology, she would even say no to that. You know what I'm saying? It just was like, no, you're just done. Goodbye.
Well, in an unbelievable way, down to the smallest detail of that story, it compares to if I could make it through the story, I would give the
It's not necessarily a fun subject.
the unbelievable similarities. Even down to what prompted that last interchange between you and your mom. Even the subject matter of the conversation. But I won't be able to get into all that.
With you and your mom, or who are?
My brother.
Oh, you and your brother. Jesus. Yeah, disconnection is not a fucking joke. I mean, it's people, you know, people say stuff like, you know, I saw, this is something I do want to say about disconnection, is that I saw, I think it's Ron Miscavige, Dave Miscavige. I saw him on the Joe Rogan podcast, and I kind of got the feeling from Joe Rogan like he wasn't convinced. He had this kind of unconvinced feel to him, where he would be saying like, "Oh, you're going to, you know, they had you trapped in there. Well, what are they going to do? You know, what were they going to do if you try to rush out? Would they shoot you?" And Ron would be like, "No, they wouldn't shoot you." And he's like, "You know, what would they do? Oh, they might tackle you." And Joe would be like, "Ooh," and he kind of was being a little sarcastic because it didn't sound very threatening. And I just wanted Ron to say some words that he didn't say, and I don't know if he just didn't think of it or he just thought that everybody kind of saw this, but he come out enough was that, no, it's not really that you're afraid for yourself if you want to leave Scientology. It's not that you feel like they're going to beat you up. That's not the threat. It's the threat that you're going to lose your fucking family. You're going to lose your family. You're going to lose your friends. You're going to lose everyone around you. And that's the thing that I felt like I wanted to go on that show and almost defend Ron Miscavige and say, look, he, you know, I want to add some to what he's saying and kind of explain a little bit about why it's dangerous. It's not dangerous because they, you know, in any sort of action movie way. It's dangerous in the real practical way. When I look on my Facebook, like earlier tonight, and there's 10 plus people that I see on a friends list of their friends, and these 10 people have all blocked me, and I've known them for 20 years, right? That's just friends, right? I barely even know them, and I didn't say anything about them. Blocked, right? That's your family too. Blocked. It's just disgusting.
Right. I think the show has been very consistent on its messaging of saying we are attacking and exposing and discussing abusive practices and not beliefs. And particularly in season 1, that was a very black and white issue. It was the differentiating between criticizing abuses and criticizing beliefs. But what makes it so hard to continue with that narrative with such a distinct separation between beliefs and practices is how the beliefs justify the practices. And I guess if you wanted to give Scientology a benefit of the doubt, you would say, kind of similar to any other body of knowledge, that you can read the beliefs and different people will use them to justify different practices, right? I mean, that's one quote that I do, I think I got this from Reza Aslan. You bring your morality, you project your morality into your religion. You don't get your morality from your religion. But the difference with Scientology is that this practice of breaking apart families and enforcing disconnection, and even this concept of enforcing disconnection, you go, okay, did someone put a gun to a parent's head to make them disconnect from their child? No, that's not how it works. But you do either have an ethics officer, very often giving someone that choice, that sort of gun to the head choice, disconnect or else. But more often it's someone who has so bought into the Scientology story and the Scientology way of thinking, and that their belief in Scientology is what justifies their practice of just discarding their children or their spouse or their parents or whatever. And you go, okay, if that was just a fringe interpretation of Scientology, then there might be an argument that the beliefs weren't responsible for the practice. But it's not a fringe practice in Scientology. Every fucking Scientologist you know either has or knows someone whose family has been torn apart. But if you were to go up to these Scientologists whose families have been torn apart and you ask them, did Scientology tear apart your family? They would say, of course not. What are you talking about? You're insane. No, my brother who went crazy decided to leave the family. It's him who's responsible. Scientologists aren't even capable of recognizing that their belief in Scientology is responsible for this practice of disconnection. And you know, one of the things, how can I get around to this? Like with my brother, there was I'm not going to tell the whole story because it's hard. There was a point where my brother, my twin brother, sent me and my mom an email letter of disconnection. He sort of lashed out at us in the way you lashed out at your mom. And it was so obvious to me. He was only doing that because he knew what was going on in our heads on the other end. He knew how we were processing the information we were getting about the kind of stuff he was doing. He knew, because of his experience in Scientology, that we were building up in our heads this huge image of him as a terrible, fucking evil, suppressive person. And so he was lashing out at us with the kind of venom he knew was being created in us about him. And if he didn't have this idea that he was becoming this big, huge monster in our eyes, he never would have lashed out at us the way that he did. So even what he did was just a reaction to what he knew we were being told to believe about him. Do you see what I'm saying? And yeah, I'm wondering if you felt there was a dynamic, a similar dynamic between what happened with you and your mom and how, you know, I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts about that?
So, yeah, that's an interesting question. You touched on a lot there. So if we back up a little bit, I think that when it comes to disconnections, one small thing that I would say is, yes, they don't force you, but it's like a multi-level disconnection scheme. Because if I don't disconnect from that SP, then I get declared and they disconnect from me. So it's not like they don't put a gun to your head, but they come to you with the conditions, and they come to you and they say, you know, here's the dynamics. You need to figure out this is how they do it. And if you really want to get into how they get people to disconnect, they start by saying, here's the 8 dynamics. It all starts with that. And you go, oh, great is good. And you start to work them into understanding that disconnecting from this person is the greatest good for the greatest number of dynamics. And here's the policy that supports it, and blah, 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 blah. Now, if they come to me and I'm a Scientologist and they give all of this to me, I am not disconnecting. Well, now I've got a problem, because now I'm PTS and I can't go up the bridge. And so now they got to figure out what to do with me. Now I'm the problem. And then if somebody won't, now they're starting to think, should people disconnect from me? And so now there is threat. Now the threat is on me of losing all of my family and friends. And that's a subtle piece that people don't always get. It's not like they go, oh, maybe you should disconnect. And they go, sure. There's policies, there's procedures on how they do it. And the threat of losing your family and friends, you losing them because you didn't disconnect, is also there. So that's one thing. Another thing is that you touched on there was belief and behavior. I'm a huge fan of a guy, you may know him, Sam Harris. I listen to Sam Harris like crazy. I don't agree with everything he says, but I really admire the way that he thinks about things. I think he's a very clear thinker and very rational guy. And he talks about this a lot. And he's focused more on Islam, but it's a good example because you've got a lot of extremes. You've got peace-loving Muslims that wouldn't hurt a fly on one side, and then you've got crazy, suicide bombing maniacs on the other side, and they're all coming from the same book. And so that question of behavior versus belief is important. And Sam is of the opinion, and I am also of the opinion, that there are behaviors in this world that either one, would never exist without the beliefs, ever, or two, are made more intense or stronger or supported or justified by those beliefs. For example, if you are, and this is something he talks about a lot, so don't, I'm not some genius here, that's him, but if you really, really believe in the Quran and you are just a devout Muslim, it kind of makes sense to suicide bomb because you are killing infidels and that's what you're supposed to do to go to heaven. It pretty much spells that out. I mean, obviously it's all open to interpretation, but you can imagine being in a world where you actually think that this is the best thing to do. You're actually doing something really good. And yet without beliefs, it doesn't really make sense. If you remove that belief, you're not really going to get a lot of suicide bombers. You'll still get some because they're just crazy people in the world. Those crazy people are twisting the beliefs and everything. And these are all valid arguments. But I think that, if we just come back to what I know about, which is my own experience, there's a lot of things in my life that happened to me that there's no effing way that they would have happened without these core beliefs. And so that's what I have to say about the belief thing. And then the third point, or the third question there, sounded like you were saying, did I feel like in a way I had kind of become more of a monster in that moment because everyone was treating me like a monster? To say that that I did. I mean, at heart, in my sort of core, I've always been a relatively good guy. It's been a very few times in my life, I think, where I've intentionally hurt people just to hurt them, or I don't mean physically. I'm not like a serial killer or anything. I'm just saying, I've gone out of my way to do something nasty that I shouldn't have done. Obviously, when you're young, you do a lot of kind of dumb stuff. But generally speaking, I try to be nice to people. I try to give them their space and let them get their point across, even if I don't agree and everything like that. And I never am like how I was to her. And I really don't want to sound like I'm putting blame on them, even though, look, I'm not really into the whole blame thing, but I do feel like the way that I was toward my family had a correlation with the way that they were treating me. And that has a correlation with the things that they believed.
Right. Yeah. The things you mentioned about differentiating between behaviors and attitudes that would never exist if not for the belief, and behavior and attitudes that could exist on their own, is a fantastic point. I subscribe to Sam Harris's podcast, and I listen to him a lot. It was actually very hard for me to warm up to him because he's so anti-religion. I tried to read End of Faith, and once he started talking about how the moderates in a religion are even worse than the extremists because they are the ones that provide air cover for the extremists, I was like, I'm out. I was like, I can't follow this line of reasoning. But that was a couple of years ago. And the more I listen to him, the more I go, man, you get into a lot of trouble for saying some of the most obvious stuff.
Yeah. And
it's taken me a while to warm up to him, but you know, between listening to him and on the other end of the spectrum, Reza Aslan, man, I listened to a fantastic, it was either 1 or 2 hour kind of moderated debate between Sam and Reza, and that kind of shit really excites me. I love that stuff. Like seeing how two of the brightest minds out there, the most highly educated, intelligent people, can so fundamentally agree on such important issues should cause everyone to question whether they're actually right about anything. Like it is all a wide open field of interpretation. But Sam's views and the way he approaches analyzing behavior in Islam or in the world of Islam has so many similarities to Scientology because, you know, like you said, on the one end, you've got guys literally willing to blow up a crowd of innocent people. On the other hand, you have some of the most peaceful people you'd ever met. And they both point to the same book as what justifies their own actions. And that's where you get that idea of you bring your morality into your religion. Like if you're a pedophile and you get into Scientology, these policies like children are just thetans in little bodies, and you know, there are many things in Scientology that you could use to justify your behavior. And yet your average Scientologist would say, no, of course all Scientologists are against pedophilia. You said that if you're a true, honest believer in the literal words of the Quran, blowing yourself up to kill people makes sense. But if you're a moderate and you don't believe in the literal interpretation of the Quran, then no, it doesn't make sense. Well, if you're a Scientologist and you believe in the story of Scientology literally, disconnecting from your family members when they have a problem with Scientology makes sense. And that's what I want people to understand, is that that particular bad behavior would never exist if not for the beliefs of Scientology. And maybe someone could say, oh, get out of here. There's family members outside of Scientology who've been estranged for decades over the smallest things. Well, yeah, that's fine. But in the case of Scientology disconnection, parents almost always, when they're disconnecting from their children, it's not because of any interpersonal conflict other than the child questioned or rejected Scientology. And I mean, I could go on about it all day, but
well, let me jump in for a second. Because I want to share an experience that I had recently that kind of accents some of this, which is that the other thing about this is that there are also behaviors that in everyone, in every religion, that you wouldn't do except for because you have this belief. So you can put your own morality in. You can be a pedophile that comes along and says, well, oh, Jesus, children, you know, whatever. On the other hand, maybe you're somebody that has never stoned anyone to death, and then you became very, very Christian and decided that was the thing to do, you know, right? Where did you get this weird idea that you should stone someone to death? Well, that's from the book. I'm reading it, and this is what I should do. I mean, obviously it doesn't happen much now, but there are some things in Scientology that create behaviors that wouldn't otherwise have existed. Like, you know, like for example, the way that disconnection works. It's not like, oh, I'm not going to talk to them anymore, and I'll kind of, I'll talk to them for a little while and I'm done. It's like they have almost like a formal mental block on you, as if you don't exist anymore. And every time that you try to communicate through that block, they have these predetermined ways that they're even supposed to communicate with you if they're forced to, right? Good roads, fair weather treatment that they literally have documentation on how to operate a communication mechanism towards you. Like, you can't even talk to them anymore. Now you're talking to their sort of representative, their PR version of themselves. It's such a, like, a slimy, disgusting thing to actually encounter, that that's why I think, for me and for some other people I've talked to, worse than it sounds, because it's not like your, you know, aunt that you never talk to. That it's not the same. It's the aunt that avoids you, hates everything that you do, never talks to you, pretends like she doesn't know who you are, and then when you try to talk to her in a situation where she has to respond, like if she were in public on cameras or whatever the situation is, you get this completely fake, cold, icy, like quasi-attacking version of a person. It's kind of like those Scientology videos where you see Tommy Davis and all these kind of guys that are trying to antagonize people, and so they mock up these emotions that aren't even real, and you're like, you know, oh, you wanted me to get, what was that line he said, like, you wanted me mad? Well, I'm here and I'm really mad, or whatever it was. And you're looking at him like, no, I don't think you're mad. I think you're pretending to be mad because you're just trying to, like, play this role. Like, you're not even a human. You're not even actually being mad. You're just pretending to be mad. And that's what you're kind of interfacing with. So that whole aspect of the disconnection, in my opinion, would never exist without Scientology. I think that's scripted. And here's your instructions on how to disconnect. Here's what we do. Apply this to this situation. So disconnection, from my point of view, is absolutely driven by Scientology. And another thing on top of it that people may not realize is that if there's that drunk guy that's all in your family that's always screwing stuff up, and then everyone just says, you know what, we're done with that guy, he can fix that. He can come back, he can get a better job, he can sober up, and he can say, look, guys, whatever his thing is, you know, I'm born again, I'm cool again. Look, I would like to kind of make amends, and you know, I'm sorry, and come back to the group. That will never happen ever with someone who's been disconnected, right? If you're declared, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how many times you apologize. You can delete all your videos and apologize and, oh, I'm so sorry, will you guys talk to me? No, right? That's it. And probably will be for me too. There's nothing I can say that will unsay the things I've said. And God, even if we somehow could, right, it would be such a goddamn mountain of processing and sec checks and conditions and lowers and just, you know what I'm saying? It would be, right.
Well,
the RPF doesn't exist anymore, but
it wouldn't be enough to say, okay, fine, I'm over it. Let's let bygones be bygones. Live and let live. We'll all put down our weapons. Like, that wouldn't be good enough in order for a Scientologist to reconnect with the family member who'd been declared. What it would take would be full on, complete 180, going back, apologizing in writing for everything you've done to the church, fully documenting in the most excruciating detail everything you've done, everything you've said, anyone you've ever said it to. Throw anyone you know under the bus, any Scientologist who might be secretly under the radar. Then you'd have to go and make amends. You would have to do some act that greatly forwarded the survival of Scientology. You either have to donate a ton of money or get people into Scientology, or go and publicly trash talk everyone who used to be on your, who was recently on your team, quote unquote, kind of like what Marty Rathman's doing lately. You would have to kiss so much ass, so much Scientology ass for so long. And then after all of that, beg for all the other Scientologists to accept you back into the group. In other words, you have to become a Scientologist again. You can't just say, all right, fine, let's move on. They're like, no, 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 unless you come back and pick up our cause as your own once more, you're forever going to be disconnected from your family. I mean, that is fucking insane. And I swear to God, Scientology makes all of its own headaches. And by becoming so aggressive in enforcing this policy. And I know the policies existed from the day LRH wrote it. I know it was always a policy with bad intentions, but it's become so aggressive. To some extent, this is responsible for most of the shit Scientology gets, is how it has fucked so many families.
Yeah. And you know, one thing that is extremely frustrating that, you know, it's a small point, but I haven't seen people talk about it, but to me, it just drives me crazy, is that, and you may remember this quote better than me, but I remember reading a few times, you know how you read everything 1,000 times in Scientology. I remember a few times reading something about that Lafayette had said about, oh, like handling an SP is totally easy, but basically saying, but I'm not going to do that for them, you know, because they're the slime. He said, you know what I'm saying? And if you don't know what I'm saying,
it's in one of the main 3 policies on the subject of handling PTSness and disconnection. And it says, we have the technology to handle SPs, but we'll get around to them once we're finished with like basically when we're finished with all the good guys, we'll get around to handling the SPs.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's like,
why spend our time?
If you have the technology, yeah, if you have it, then why are you doing this whole disconnection, all this shit, right? If you've got the magic pill that's going to make me love Scientology, right? I go in there and you pat me on the back and say abracadabra, and now I'm not an SP, then why are you breaking up families?
Right.
You see what I'm saying? It's like they're doing it, and then on top of that, they're saying, we don't really have to do this. I mean, it'd be easy to not do this, but no, we're going to just do it. We're going to punish everyone who's ever criticized us forever. And then maybe in the last 300 years of this planet, when we've cleared everyone and we're all zooming around, you know, snapping and popping everywhere, then we'll open up the cage, let the SPs out for some auditing. It's fucking nuts. You know?
That's right.
And I remember even then going, I remember even then reading it, obviously still in the church, reading it going like, wait, what? You know, like, if you have, why would you not release that? I don't understand, you know?
And obviously the answer to those kind of questions lies in the fact that it's all bullshit.
Yeah. Like blindness.
What I think goes over, what I remember definitely went over my head reading all that as a Scientologist is the basic vindictiveness that it would require to have that as a policy, right? Because there's many places where LRH frames auditing as an award, as a privilege, which is funny because the public are beaten over the head to pay for it. But if you're a staff member, you are conditioned to believe, no. You have to earn the right to receive auditing. And so in these policies you're talking about, it's, if you're, where he's talking about, we'll get around to the SPs once we've finished with everyone else who's not getting in our way. If you're a Scientologist and you believe that we are all living in a prison planet like the Matrix, then you believe that auditing is not only a privilege, but the greatest gift mankind could have ever received, the opportunity to get out of the trap, the opportunity to finally be free from the eternal prison, then it makes sense to go, nah, we're going to leave the SPs in the prison until the very, very end. Like, if you believe that shit, the conclusion makes sense. Even the vindictiveness makes sense. You know, like maybe someone who's a true Christian believes in turning the other cheek and forgiveness. Scientology ain't about turning the other cheek and forgiveness. No. That is a foreign concept in Scientology. LRH was a vindictive motherfucker, and it is permeated throughout his policies and technical bulletins. And that is a frame of mind Scientologists get into. There's nothing wrong with vindictiveness or eye for an eye, or because that's how the church behaves. Yeah,
exactly. That's exactly, and that's why they do the attack, don't offend, and all this is kind of like, oh, you said something about us, oh, it's on now, we're gonna roll. But you know, there's a lot of interesting stuff to me in what you said there. So when you brought up the thought of something I have believed and was raised to believe, and I don't know exactly where, in what red volume, you know, where that thing was, but I used to ask a lot of questions to my mother about, well, why is it that science is saying that, you know, the universe is this old, and we're saying it's, you know, orders of magnitude older. And so she would say, well, the way that they carbon date stuff is wrong, which is, yeah, I'm sure you probably heard that.
Oh, totally, because that's how you'd have to explain it.
LRH knows how to carbon date stuff.
Or that Thetans mocked up the molecules in the Earth, and Thetans are the ones that control the rate of atomic decay or whatever, and that the rules of the MEST universe, MEST means matter, energy, space-time, the physical universe, were created by Thetans. So we could easily have created a universe that's 76 trillion years old, but set up the rules of decay that that scientists would only think it was 4.5 billion, and you're like, yeah, okay, I get it. That's a lot of gymnastics.
Yeah. And so, but carbon dating really, because we're on Earth, and Earth's only been around for whatever it is, and so I was kind of going, well, that's not enough though, because the edges of the universe, and what we had was a little bit less back then, but we pretty much had some idea that basically the universe was nowhere as old as what Scientology is saying. And so to answer, she basically told me that, first of all, Earth has cycles, and I don't mean that it turns. I mean that there's like a larger level outside the Matrix, if you will. And this, keep in mind, this is before the movie The Matrix, okay? So this is not a copy of The Matrix, which is that if you look back and you find these ancient geodes with spark plugs in them and layers of sand underneath the ground that have been turned into glass in a way that only nuclear, explosions supposedly could make, and all these pieces that she was bringing to my attention. Basically, the Earth has cycles, okay? And that our whole human race, let's say, gets to a certain point, wipes itself out, and then starts over again. And that literally what she told me, I mean, it was so specific. She was telling me when it happened last time. She was saying that that we almost didn't get through the Nazis and World War II this time, and that last time we hadn't. And that the only reason that we did get through it this time was because Scientology, because the data was coming out, right? Because LRH was here, and that's why we made it through the Cold War and through World War II. And I was just wondering, have you ever heard any of that? Because I never hear anyone talk about that level of craziness.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, you're reminding me of these, here's a few books. Scientology is all about conspiracy theories, particularly if it has to do with the history of alien life on this planet, or how the planet's controlled by a handful of powerful Jewish international bankers. And so there's Jim Marr's book, Rule by Secrecy. There's Jim Marr's book, Alien Agenda. And then there's the book, I don't know who it was written by, The Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden was considered so similar to Scientology's true ideology that Scientologists were banned from reading that book. It was so similar to either what's on the OT levels or what people thought should be on the OT levels that Scientologists were literally prevented from reading that book. But those kind of books do talk about what you're talking about. That exact same thing. And again, I'm not sure if Scientologists love those books just because it reflects what they already know in Scientology, or if or if they believe it in Scientology because they're so inclined to just believe in that kind of story in general. And I'll tell you, I believe that shit 100%, because to me, it made the Scientology story make sense, right?
Yeah.
And I lost. I was gonna reference something earlier on in what you were just saying. But your question was, had I heard anything along those lines? And absolutely.
Yeah. That's crazy. I mean, it's the thing that I guess, and this has to do with beliefs, is that I've never talked to people about what I believed or believe, because it's just so out there, it's so out there. Even just saying, oh, there's this ARC triangle, no one knows what you're talking about. You're immediately like, what's this guy weird? Like, does he think he's a wizard with triangles of knowledge? They don't have any idea. And what I was raised to believe, what I just told you, I was raised to believe that. And it's very hard to shake these kinds of beliefs, because I can go on the internet right now and I can find evidence of that. And I can find people debunking that evidence, and it's, whenever you get in this situation, it's kind of like the inside job kind of theory. It's like you have a tons of people saying, no, there's no way. And then you have a ton of videos and evidence that seems compelling that say, no, it was an inside job. And it's like people tend to just go with the majority there. But it would be different if your whole life you were raised completely believing, without a doubt, with your whole culture and everyone you knew, and documentation that supports it, and this is your religion, this is what you believe, that it was an inside job. Now, no matter what you say, 10, 20 years from now, you're always going to have that little sliver in your mind that's going, but what if it really was an inside job? Right. You know what I'm saying? And that's how I feel about a lot of this stuff. If I'm being just totally honest, I feel when I think about Scientology's core beliefs, there's always just a low hum in my mind of like, SPs, dude, and maybe they're right, and maybe we're Thetans, and maybe, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's crazy, and it's like the burden that never goes away. No matter how much evidence I get to the contrary, that indoctrination from an early age is just there. It's just always there.
It's true. On some level,
it's
for
very
me,
minimal, but
that indoctrination, because again, I think you were exposed to that kind of indoctrination more intensely at an earlier age than I was. But I remember, for me, it was exciting. Like when you hear these conspiracy space opera type theories and stories, particularly when it's coming from Hubbard, who you've been indoctrinated to believe is somewhat infallible. For me, I was like, oh shit, that's exciting. We get to believe in this? Yes! And then, when
Confederacy and the Galactic Confederacy, and you got Theta Com and Tome 40. I mean, it's literally like being in Star Wars. It's
right.
like, oh,
the fifth Galactic Invader Force, and you're like,
yeah,
oh shit, nice. And yeah, that the angle on that pyramid does seem not possible. That could only be done by UFOs. Now, I'm saying it jokingly because it sounds funny to talk about it. Dude, I would love for the pyramids to have been made by aliens. That's exciting.
Yeah.
And when I see the documentaries about that stuff, I'm like, yeah, man, that seems real legit. I like this. But at the same time, at least no longer being in Scientology, I'm willing to go, yeah, but I tend to believe that because I really want to believe that, because that would be really fucking cool and exciting. But at the same time, I know we don't really have evidence of that. And but part of me wants that to be true. But the thing is, when I was in Scientology, I could be like, no, it is true. We all know it's true. It's fucking true. And so you see, I guess this is one of those examples where I sort of go, I'm not sure I ever really believed it. I just really, really wanted to believe it and was allowed to. Yeah,
I see what you're saying. For me, a lot of the stuff that's just the life I see around me. I mean, this is the reality that we're in. And a lot of my time away from Scientology was spent unraveling that and trying to rediscover what even is reality. It was such a crazy time in my life after the ranch the second time. Mostly because of that, because now it's just in the normal world where people think whatever normal people think, and I was just hit with this, confronted with this reality of like, you are not normal. The things that you are believing are effing crazy, right, compared to what normal people. And like, even if you take somebody who is like, let's say a Christian or very, very Christian, whatever that means. I don't know how you would sort of rate that, but somebody who's a strong believer in the Bible and that kind of stuff, that person's view on reality is so much closer to an atheist view on reality than mine was. It's like, they think, oh yeah, all this stuff is the same as the atheist is saying. It's mostly about why it's that way, and there's a presence here with me, and so on, and what the afterlife is like. But they basically agree about what this even is. And yet, for me, it was like, oh no, this is all an illusion created by our mind, because we have these implants, and we've all done these. We've all committed these overts on each other for trillions of years, and so we're in this prison. The politicians, the artists, the criminals, the psychiatrists from other planets were sent here. And actually, I didn't know about Xenu until I think until that South Park episode, which is a whole another thing I could talk about how weird it was to see Xenu. I took it in a totally different way than most Scientologists or ex-Scientologists. I think I was kind of actually, this is relevant. Let me tell you what I thought when I saw that South Park episode. I thought, focusing on that one, like that one seems pretty normal to me. The story of Xenu is like, yeah, okay. I mean, that one kind of makes sense. I mean, you want to talk about weird stuff in the Scientology space opera. That's not one of them. You know,
that's because
like
people don't know the other story. Like on my channel, when I put up the Matrix, Scientology and Disconnection.
Yeah.
I'd never heard anybody else put out a video explaining that this is what Scientologists believe about the nature of reality and existence. People get so wrapped up into the Xenu shit and the celebrity shit and the Aleister Crowley shit that they talk about that mostly.
Yeah, I know. And so when I saw that, I was kind of going, huh, yeah, I guess that story might seem weird to people. But to me, that's like a TV episode, watching Xenu get to grab these. Like that's, you can draw that. There's things in Scientology that you wouldn't even like, how would I even articulate that on TV? It's so weird. You know, like all these crazy implants with the black and white and the, you know what I'm saying, all the bang bang clash and all this stuff. And so I had this a comic that I started called Devin the Thetan, and it's on my website, and I've done quite a few of them. I don't know if you've seen them or not, but
I've seen them. They're awesome.
Fun. Yeah, and one of the things that I try to get with that is I try to expose in a kind of funny way what Scientologists are kind of like and the things that actually they are normal to them. Like I've got the Heliotrope implants on there, totally normal to them, but the description of what's happening is just, when you step back from it, it's crazy. It's like talking bombs dropping after, you know, and then you're getting sucked up into spaceships where you're being spun around on wheels and they're implanting these ideas into you. And it's just like, it's almost so crazy that it almost makes sense why you would believe it, you know, because it's almost like, dude, it's like someone running and be like, dude, you're not going to believe what just happened to me. I was running down the street, you know, I almost got hit by a car. Then I dropped $5. Then someone picked it up and handed it to me. And then I grabbed a lotto ticket, and that just happened to win me $200. And then I, you know, whatever. And then that's how I got here. And you go, that's so weird. It has to be true. You know, like, why would you make that up? You kind of get that feeling like, well, that can't be made up because it's just too strange.
So many times I see comments like, how come Scientologists don't connect these dots that L. Ron Hubbard was a prolific science fiction writer and then he came up with this sci-fi religion? And they go, don't Scientologists see the red flag there? And I go, no, you don't get it. Scientologists believe that the reason he was such a prolific science fiction writer is because he had this crystal clear memory of all of his previous lives over the last trillions of years, and he's writing about true shit. And that's because that's literally what LRH said. He said somewhere something along the lines of, I've never written a word of fiction in my entire life. I mean, he's also quoted someone else as saying that. I think he's also quoted Doc Smith as saying that. But he himself has said something, and that's what Scientologists believe. They don't see it as a red flag.
No. Well, see, the thing is, the way I was raised is that his sci-fi books were partially or fully whole track recall, which is Scientology's way to say remembering those trillions of years before, you know, all your whole time in all those trillions of years is called the whole track. So whole track recall means literally he's penning, oh, then I did that, and then that happened. Now, some of those stories may not literally be about him. Maybe it's, oh, I remember back when I was an alien with 7 heads and I was in a robot body that thing happened, so I'm going to write that story. But literally they believe that those stories were true, like Battlefield Earth, true story. That's one thing that people don't necessarily get from that when they watch the movie and they go, ooh, that was horrible. And then they find out it's a Scientology book and they go, okay, that's Battlefield Earth. The way I was raised to believe is that that's an actual true story that happened here. Teagiak is here. that happened to us.
Right. Yeah, I mean, in part 2 of Battlefield Earth, when part 2 becomes a whole new chapter of the alien bankers coming to Earth, I was like, shit, that's Scientology. That is what Scientologists believe. I mean, I'm not sure I could put pen to paper and talk about the alien bankers, but between the aliens, the prison planet, and the bankers who run the world, it really was. It's one of the reasons Scientologists just love the book. Is that book is a reflection of the Scientology beliefs. I mean, I don't remember being told or hearing or believing that the whole Johnny Goodboy Tyler and the cyclos and the gold mining, harvesting, using Earth to harvest natural resources, and then wiping out the Earth with nuclear weapons. I don't remember thinking, oh, this is retelling of an incident that happened on Earth. But even as I say that out loud right now, I realize how similar that is to what Scientologists are told, that this planet, Earth, did have an earlier highly advanced civilization that was completely wiped out with nuclear weapons, and that is a repeating cycle on Earth. And this is to what you were saying earlier. It's incredible.
You know what's funny about the Xenu story though, that that I had forgotten and then I got reminded the other day is Scientology tries really hard, right? To what was that? I think it was also what's his name? What's his name? Tommy Davis. I think it was also him that went on TV and they were like, so, you know, is it true that your religion believes in aliens or whatever? And he's like, that story is unrecognizable to me or whatever he said, you know? Like, whoa. It's interesting because actually when LRH was alive, he tried to make a movie from that story, right? Revolt in the Stars. He wrote the damn screenplay for it.
Couldn't get it made. He turned it into an audiobook, or the church turned it into an audiobook.
Making a movie. Yeah, his idea was like, this is gonna stimulate everybody, and then they're just gonna be searching around desperately for answers, and there will be. Which, first of all, is kind of a fucked up way to get new membership, and second of all, it's so weird to me that really believe in LRH is the source, and he's just, you know, you got to do everything he does. So many things that I could never fucking picture LRH doing, you know, like regging someone for 2 hours to buy the basics. Can you imagine L. Ron Hubbard sitting there and being like, come on, let me explain to you how money works. The flows of money goes in and out, and money's got to go out and come back in, and otherwise you're ridging up the comm, and you got to come on, just get the basics. Well, we changed some semicolons. I'm like, I didn't know LRH. I don't really know much about him because I know the church's view of him, and then I know the sort of anti-Scientology kind of view of him. It's kind of all good, all bad, and so I'm a little allergic to sort of choosing where I'm at, but I'm pretty sure that I couldn't imagine him doing that. It just seems like he wasn't going to sit there and try to peddle one guy $2,000 worth of stuff for 3 hours straight.
I know. I think one of the differences is that he was kind of a larger than life figure. And I think there's a difference between what it might have taken for someone like him, who was also a master bullshit artist. Like, what it would have taken for him to personally do that, and what it takes for him to get other people to do that. Like, you're right. I can't imagine LRH sitting down and using big league sales closing techniques on someone. I'd more imagine him being so, let's say, egotistical to sit down with 100 different people, and anyone who didn't want to sign up in the first 5 minutes was out the fucking door. Like, next. Like, I'm only going to sign up people who aren't even questioning this. Like, if I got to talk to you for 2 hours to get you to buy a course, I'm done with you. Bye. Like, yeah. I think it was by dint of his own personality and his own, the power of his persona, I think it was different what it took for him personally to get people involved in Scientology compared to what it takes for other people to get other people involved in Scientology.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, because, I mean, he had charisma. I mean, people were following him and doing whatever he said, literally. So that's, you know, he was a charismatic character, and he wrote more than, you know, anyone pretty much, and he had a message, and he was delivering it to people in a time where science fiction was extremely popular. You know, I mean, look at all the horror films from back in the 50s. I mean, you're talking aliens.
Right.
It's giant insects and aliens. They didn't have anything else. And so, yeah, I mean, I see how he got traction, at least in the beginning, but it just seems to me that the church deviates even from how I imagined that. Even when I was a part of the church, they deviate from how I imagined that he would be. And I remember feeling this when they, right at the beginning of Golden Age of Tech, which I guess there's a second one now or something, but the original one, back when everyone thought there was only going to be one, and they said like, oh, I think it was the ethics book or some book, and they were having this big event, and they're going like, and one of these transcribers had accidentally switched around these two sentences, and you know, when people have gone through and done their course again, the order of those two things, charge was just blowing like crazy, and cases were handled, and all this stuff. And I'm just going like, I'm pretty sure that's ridiculous, and you've just invalidated everyone that's gone past that, and I can't imagine LRH ever saying that. I've never seen any policy of his. By the way, actually, everyone, please buy another copy of Dianetics, because I had to add a trademark. There was 2 dashes instead of 1. Now, granted, he did re-release a lot of the same shit over and over, so maybe they kind of, you know, tangentially did the same thing or whatever. But I don't know. It just seems like, to me, I really heavily separate these 3 things: Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, and the Church of Scientology and all of its organizations. To me, they're 3 completely different subjects. I'm not really sure about the intentions of LRH. I can't really tell if he was so wrapped up in his own shit that he really, really believed it, or if he was just like, this is sweet, you know, I got chicks all around me doing whatever I want. You know, I don't know. I really don't know. Scientology itself, I have some mixed emotions about. I mean, the outer edges of it are very practical tools, things like TRs, you know, or like, I mean, you may argue, you may debate about if lack of mass even exists, first of all, but you may debate about, oh, if it actually causes you to yawn, or if it actually makes you exasperated, which, like, I've never seen one person get exasperated because they had lack of mass, but okay. But throw all that aside, does clearing words help? Yeah, it does. You know, of course it does. Does clay demoing help you understand something? Yes, it does. I mean, I might argue a whiteboard is better, but sure, clay, you know. So the outer just seem parts there. But as you get deeper and deeper into it, it becomes much less of that until there's none of that. And then it's just literally you sitting in a room holding 2 cans with one hand, talking to yourself and twiddling a dial on an e-meter and imagining that you're talking to thetans and spirits all around you and it's like, that's the opposite of practicality. That's you exhibiting signs of having a psychotic break.
Exactly.
You know.
And
so mixed feelings about
only
that.
Because you're being told that's what's wrong with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you haven't even concluded that on your own.
No, there's nobody in history that I'm aware of that has ever thought that they had to speak to the spirits that are on their bodies to make them leave so that they could be back to their own self inhabiting this body, other than maybe, like, I don't know, maybe there's a witch somewhere in the, you know, Salem days that said something approximately similar to that, but then they just burned her and that was it. You know, that was the end of it. So that's the second one. And the third one is the church. To me, the church is the worst because I can clearly see what it's doing. So maybe if you really knew everything, then you would say that it wasn't the worst of those 3. I don't know. But based on what I can actually see and be sure about with the church itself, because they're the ones that are going on TV and lying. People like Mike Rinder, when he was in Scientology, who's going up and defending them, even and saying shit that he knows isn't true. And Tommy Davis and all these people that are doing their job, being a Scientologist, whole army of people shield themselves and shield their minds with this Scientology stuff. But now that I'm so far from it, I don't see that. I mean, I see it, but I see past that, and I go, no, you're just a guy that's lying. I don't care why you're lying. You're not lying for any good reason. You're lying for a reason that you think is good, that no one else agrees. And what's true isn't just what's true for you. It's actually what's actually true, right? If you think that you can fly and you jump out of a window and it was true for you that you can fly, you're dead. So there's a limit to that. So anyway, the church itself, and I hate to even say that word because I don't think it's a church, is what I have the biggest problem with. I think that they're abusive, and I think the way that they continuously re-release these same things over and over is just insane. It's like ludicrous. And someone was telling me the other day, I actually had a conversation with a Scientologist who had just gotten out. Just got out, like 3 or 4 months ago, out. And I was talking to them a few days ago. Still a mess, telling me all this, the whole situation, still very much in that mental process and everything. And I was kind of honored that person reached out to me. They said that my story had kind of helped them and everything. But that person was telling me that apparently, and I don't know if this is true, apparently the red volumes don't exist anymore. They're like banned now.
You can't buy them.
You can't buy them. You can't buy them. They're out of print. They're not part of the church's stuff anymore. I was like, well, what are they like? How do you get the tech or the whatever? And she's like, oh, it's all courses now. Right. And then as soon as she said that, I said, huh. So you're saying that they went from a model where you buy the books one time and then you're fine to a model where now you have to buy them again and again and again in the form of courses that they can also continue to keep re-releasing. Isn't that so convenient that whenever they revamp things, it just always happens to be in the way that you have to pay more money? And it's just so typical and disgusting, you know?
Yeah. Well, how about for time's sake, we cut it off here for today, and then hopefully we can pick up again tomorrow. I think these talks are so helpful, and so much more we can talk about. So let's do it.
Yeah. Okay, everybody, I'm really sorry. I'm not making this up. I have a cat, okay? And the cat is nowhere to be found right now. So I actually have 2 cats, okay? So this, double the chances. But next video, I will really try to hold up the fluffy white cat and maybe even try to do a double yawn.
All right, awesome. All right, have a good night, and talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.
Everybody. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching, everyone. If you want to subscribe to this channel, go ahead and click up here. If you want to watch part 1 of my interview with Nathan, go ahead and click right here. And for 2 other videos on this channel that YouTube thinks you probably have not seen before, go ahead and click up here and up here. See you guys soon.